1967 was my first appearance in the gang show. I felt very nervous in case I made a blunder or something. But during the week I got a bit more confident. I think most of the boys who had never been on the stage before felt the same way. I was selected through an audition, and it was months. It was months before we got actually on the show. Started rehearsing every week on Sundays, going over and over the things again until Ken was positive we could do it.
The rehearsals start usually in November. We don't call the full cast right away. The musical director starts off with the particular types of song items that require a lot of rehearsal. And obviously this has got to be established and polished before I get to work on setting positions and so on. I'm keen on using numbers with a large cast, and we're helped out a lot here again by parents who volunteer to join our registrar staff and whose responsibility it is to give me the boys to work on a certain number while they look after the rest. At the same time, our dance director starts limbering up a group of about 8 or 16 boys ready to form the basis of the movement and production numbers. And then in December, we start on the show proper.
Come along the back. You have to keep moving. You should overlap behind D. Now that's not very well spaced, is it? Group D should...
Then about the week before the show, we rehearse every night. Of course, we need a complete run-through of the show every evening. It's all very well rehearsing separate items, but the boys have to get to know how long they have to change between and so on, and to know the running order of the show so they don't miss an entrance. Production numbers, that is, the type of staged number which involves a great deal of movement and dance and singing, take longest, because here you have coordination of movement and singing. We generally find that one or other suffers. We try eventually to reach a standard where we hope that the pattern of movement can continue without the singing suffering and vice versa. When we start the show, the committee send out a notice to parents of new boys in the gang, and we invite them to the meeting to tell them about the show so they know roughly what their sons are in for to some degree, but also that we can get from this very often offers of help. We have done so in the past. Most of our wardrobe and props people have come from this source.
When we want to build up the team, we go to the parents' meeting and we ask for volunteers. We try to have a nucleus of the wardrobe staff from the year before. This actually is my 5th time of doing wardrobe. The producer gives us some idea of what he wants, and it's left more or less to the wardrobe staff to make it up. We must have made well over 150 costumes, I should think. The hair-eyed number was hired, but the Chinese legend was dressed absolutely from wardrobe. The emperor, the prince, the courtiers, these were all made by the wardrobe staff and cost us absolutely nothing. Once you're involved in the show, you get so terribly interested in making something out of nothing. And you get to know the boys, and I can't tell you what keeps you going on at it. It's partly the company, I think. Partly company when you're there. I think you get to the stage you think you'll never do this again, and next year you're back at it again, doing it all over, because I think you miss the company. And there is something about seeing a show growing and developing and creating something out of very little. And it is such an absolutely different thing if you've come into it never having done anything to do with stage work at all. It's just something completely different.
Slapstick has the reputation of being the most difficult thing to produce. It is in a way, because I think it's a case of art conceals art. What looks remarkably simple and easy, and what in fact looks spontaneous on the stage, is a result of very, very careful timing in rehearsal.
Ooh, it's a mouse! Yeah, right, wait a minute, I can get a little bit more surprise on finding it and noticing it, first of all. Just the table. What's this, you know? And then puzzled at first, but then when it comes out, you know, great glee in discovering about the little thread. Again,
there are one or two basic ideas. Custard pie held under the chin, the slap under the hand that propels it forcibly towards the face. You have to think of a sequence, though, which seems at the same time fairly natural. There's no good having a series of unconnected little slapstick incidents. There must be a build-up and a flow from one to the other. And of course, in a scene where you're involving all the characters, then their movements on the stage have to be very carefully plotted.
You like trifle? Well, get it! Right. Fine.
I usually work out the plot well in advance, and then we break it down and very carefully rehearse the whole thing without any props first, so that the boys are quite sure of the sequence. And then we begin to piece it together.
I'm supposed to be there!
There's no good leaving the props till the dress rehearsal. This would be absolutely fatal. You have to work at a very early stage in rehearsal with the actual cream or crazy foam, whatever is being used. And sometimes we have a dry run, a dummy run, just to handle props like tin-foil plates and so on without actually using the slosh. But eventually we have to start trying it with full props.
Keep them up there,
The scenery is largely constructed by our own stage staff. Alan Ritchie designs the sets, and this is all built in our hut.
First thoughts that I put into the show itself starts back at our first meeting with the producer. He gives me a running order, scene by scene, 20 items or 22, as the case may be. He tells me how many boys he's going to use in the number, whether he wants full stage, half stage, or front of house. From that, he tells me heights, levels, entrances he would like. I start doing roughs, just on paper, and if he's happy, I draw them properly, then cut them out, paint them, all scaled to fit the stage. It roughly takes 6 weeks to build the show completely. We have a band of willing helpers. Every year they come along and give me a hand. Lads with experience in joinery work, painting, using machinery. The Chinese legend set itself, the dragons are all very sharp features. We had to cut them in plywood, whereby they would withstand handling backstage in the theatre. In stage design, the costumes, the scenery and the lighting are combined to give you an effect.
Gang Show was started in 1932 by Ralph Reeder in London. He wrote the complete shows himself. He wanted to get away from the old-fashioned idea of the small scout concert, which was merely a campfire sing-song perhaps and a few solo items. He wanted to stage a fast-moving type of revue which would reach the standards of a West End presentation. The first one was such a success that they decided to make it an annual event, and he eventually began to write a new show every year and virtually turned over the material for scouts in all parts of the country to use if they wished to build up a show. What Gang Show does for scouts and scouting is probably an extension of what scouts and scouting do for the boys. It teaches them teamwork and perseverance, but more than that, it gives them something to work for, something to aim for, which is a performance for the public. Their achievements in other branches of scouting are more personal for themselves. I don't think Gang Show presents scouting on the stage. That's not the idea. The idea is to make it seem evident that here are a team of people who are working together and producing a polished performance.
Chinese legend. It is the 14th birthday of the young prince. The subjects, both rich and poor, gather outside the palace to pay homage to their youthful heir. Inside the palace there has been feasting and dancing. Gifts have been bestowed upon the royal youth, and it is now time for him to appear before the excited throng, waiting outside the doors of his father's house. Somewhere in the crowd there is a young beggar boy, anxious to see his prince and offer him some small token of his love for him. The beggar boy is rich only in health. The prince is a cripple.